This is Cormac Mackay, a man who endlessly trawled the high seas aboard the SS Julie, making an honest living as an independent fisherman. It paid his bills, but every day he found himself dreaming of other things. For his whole life, he'd wanted to hunt for all the treasures lost to the deep, and one day he began itching to turn that dream into a reality. But every time he thought about doing it, he'd find himself running headlong into a mental brick wall. As much as he tried, he just couldn't seem to find a way around it. He thought that perhaps what he needed was a little step back to get some perspective. Luckily for him, an opportunity to do just that presented itself. A little town in the back end of nowhere called Greater Marrow. It was looking for a new fisherman, just the job for Cormac. He figured a little time out in the comfort of nature would do him a world of good. However, as the night rolled in, a thick fog blanketed the seas, and before Cormac could pick anything out of the gloom, suffice it to say, Cormac's first day didn't get off to the best start. Luckily, the mayor of Greater Marrow managed to get him set up with a new boat. It was a shame to lose his old one, but Cormac got aboard the new vessel and began his first day of fishing. It was dull, but the new boat handled pretty well, plus it came with a spyglass and horn, so it certainly had advantages over the old vessel. Upon returning to the dock late that evening, Cormac was once again greeted by the town's mayor, who offered to sell the new boat, an offer Cormac accepted. The mayor then introduced him to some of the townsfolk. Among them was a fishmonger named Roger, to whom Cormac would be selling his catches. There was also a shipwright named Samantha, who'd help out with any repairs to the new boat for a small fee. Once the tour was over, Cormac sat on the dock and gazed out upon the foggy sea. Greater Marrow seemed a little run down, but the people were friendly enough. He decided that this place would be just fine until he got enough money for dredging equipment. As his last act of the day, he dubbed his new boat the SSS Julie. The next morning, Cormac found himself back out on the water. During his fishing, he spotted a message in a bottle bobbing in the water. After hurriedly dropping everything to grab it, he read the message. It seemed like a diary entry, written by an unnamed woman during her honeymoon. She spoke of how her husband had renamed his boat after her, but let slip that she had tainted the renaming ceremony. As appalled as Cormac was that such a sacred tradition had been sullied, nothing could wipe away his beaming smile. It wasn't much, but he had a piece of treasure at last. He put it away, and his heart sank a little as he resumed fishing. After Cormac sold the day's catch, Roger began offering contracts for specific orders of fish, which paid a little extra on top. They were a nice bonus, but hardly offered any extra excitement to Cormac's days. When he left Roger's that evening, he stumbled upon an old lady making her way down from the lighthouse. She didn't say what her name was, and she eyed Cormac suspiciously, advising him to move on. Bemused, Cormac returned to his boat, where he spent a quiet night reading and thinking of ways to earn more money for some dredging equipment. As luck would have it, more work presented itself. The mayor needed Cormac to make a delivery across the bay to Little Marrow. The package in question was off, to say the least, but Cormac accepted the contract, getting the box aboard without holding it for any longer than necessary. Upon receiving the package, the dockworker took it without so much as a word of thanks, much less proper payment. Deflated, Cormac wandered into a shop. The man there was selling trinkets, and Cormac's eyes filled with wonder as he pored over them. The man offered to buy any trinkets and treasures that Cormac had to offer, but the fisherman's shoulders only slumped in response, as he remembered that he had nothing to sell, and no way to change that. Soon, Greater Marrow began to grow and prosper, in no small part thanks to the boost provided by Cormac's fishing. Samantha opened a dry dock where she could upgrade the Julie. Unfortunately, the upgrades required materials that Cormac had no means of getting his hands on, something that only exacerbated his growing frustrations. All he wanted to do was hunt for treasure, but there didn't seem to be anywhere he could go to buy dredging equipment, and even if he did find some, there was still a mental block in the way. No matter what, it seemed his dream was sunk, at least for the time being. On his way out of the shipyard though, Samantha mentioned a red glow, one only seen by night that came from the far side of Greater Marrow. Cormac went outside and, sure enough, a red glow was rising into the sky. He was surprised he hadn't noticed it before, but otherwise carried on his business. Days of monotonous fishing went by until Cormac was snapped out of his bored stupor by an entirely unexpected catch. It was a strange cod, like nothing he'd ever seen before. Something about the fish fascinated Cormac, so he brought it back to Roger. The fishmonger seemed to recognize it, describing it as an all-seeing cod, apparently not the first mutated fish he'd seen. He called them aberrants. Without much hesitation, he cut the fish open and presented Cormac with a handkerchief from the fish's innards. Cormac stared at it for a while, before his face lit up. He thanked Roger for the piece of priceless treasure and rushed back to the Julie. That night, the handkerchief now in pride of place, Cormac was reading a book when bang! A man was at the window, rambling about the handkerchief. He asked if Cormac could bring it to his island, just to the south, and vanished into the darkness. Startled but nonetheless intrigued by a fellow treasure enthusiast, Cormac decided to pay him a visit. Upon arriving at the island, the mysterious man introduced himself as the collector. He informed Cormac that he was hunting for relics lost in the local seas. Lacking a boat himself, he offered Cormac a deal. The collector would provide him with a piece of dredging equipment for no cost, if he used it to find all of the lost relics. Something about the relics immediately got Cormac's mind buzzing. Like, this was it. This was his chance. His treasure hunting career could finally get off the ground. With no further hesitation, he accepted the collector's offer. The man even offered to let Cormac have the Talisman of the Deep and peculiar engine in the shed, which, whilst weird and off-putting, would perhaps come in handy eventually. Cormac quickly returned to the Julie and set off, eager to put his new equipment to use. His first treasure hunt soon presented itself. The couple from the message in the bottle had run aground, no doubt because of the tainted renaming ceremony, so Cormac quite happily dredged up the wreckage from her old broken ship. He was so happy that he stayed at the wreck long into the night before returning to port. The next morning, Cormac was getting ready to go back out on the sea and struck up a conversation with a dock worker. Talk turned to Cormac's new dredging equipment, which spurred the dock worker to tell him a story. Some 20 years ago, another fisherman in the area had an affinity for treasure and dredged up a mysterious casket. That very night, the fog rolled in for the first time, and the man's entire crew went insane, or worse. Supposedly, even the old mayor lost his mind around the same time. Something about the story unsettled Cormac, so he decided to quickly be on his way. He was eager to find more treasure, but first would need some leads on where to look. A fairly tantalizing one came from the lighthouse keeper. She spoke of how the currents carried wrecks to the north side of Greater Marrow, right where the weird red glow emanated from. Fascinated by the prospect of so many wrecks in one place, Cormac began making preparations to head up there as soon as he could. The lighthouse keeper had only shaken her head and shambled away. Eager to get some upgrades before his voyage, Cormac set about fishing and gathering materials. During his travels, he even managed to find a beautiful shiny goblet. He decided to save it up and sell all the treasure he gathered in one go for extra satisfaction. A little bit of fishing and a random three-headed cod later, Cormac finally had all the upgrades he wanted, and so headed north to the wrecks. Upon finding them, Cormac set about dredging everything he could. From the depths emerged a golden ring, a citron ring, an old iron chain, and even one of the lost relics, a giant key. With the trip a resounding success, Cormac returned to Greater Marrow, where he treated himself to a new engine and a trawl net. With this, he could catch fish as he travelled, freeing up more time for treasure hunting. After selling his treasures in Lesser Marrow for an amazing £82.50, Cormac headed back to the collector and delivered the key. Pleased, the man used a strange red book to give Cormac a special power, one that could grant his boat a sudden but unsustainable burst of speed. Cormac was a little surprised and confused, but thanked the collector all the same. He then recommended that Cormac travel to the Gale Cliffs, the most likely site of the next relic. However, that would involve heading out on a longer journey into deeper waters. So, before he went, Cormac decided to get some more upgrades for the Julie, in particular an upgrade for her hull. He quickly set about gathering the funds and materials. One night when he was doing this, however, Cormac spotted another boat silently passing by in the gloom. He hadn't seen any of the fishermen around, so he eagerly honked the horn and approached the vessel. Perhaps being out on the water at night wasn't such a good idea anymore. One option for reducing the need to be out at night was crab pots. The crabs would make their way into the traps by themselves, negating the need to fish. But if it was going to work, it would take time. Time Cormac would rather spend hunting for the next relic, but that would involve skipping out upgrades that could make the voyage easier. As much as he wanted to wait, the pull of a relic, and an eagerness to get out of the same waters as that creature, compelled Cormac to forget about the upgrades, leave Greater Marrow behind, and head for the Gale Cliffs. On the way, he ran into a strange hooded figure sitting on a tiny spit of land. He asked for something to eat, so Cormac offered him a mackerel. The man then proceeded to rip out the fish's heart, devour it raw, and throw everything else away. He then calmly asked for a tiger mackerel. At this point, the display didn't particularly shock Cormac. Greater Marrow was turning out to be a pretty strange place. The man probably only wanted the fish for some kind of ungodly ritual anyway. If he needed to eat at all, the man could probably subsist off the dark energy of the universe or something until Cormac got back. Not long after, he arrived at the Gale Cliffs and made landfall at the town of Ingfell. The first person he met was an old woman who requested a rotting conger eel for her dog to eat. Cormac quickly left her and spoke to a retired whaler named Boris, who told the story of a falling out he'd had with his brother Patrick. As night fell, Cormac tentatively ventured out onto the water to see what kind of fish were in the local seas. Of course, with a catch on board, he needed to sell it, and soon. Cormac opted to head for another source of light across the bay from Ingfell. There he found a pontoon with a little shack built atop it. A woman stepped out of it, introducing herself as Maggie, a travelling merchant. She quite happily offered to buy the catch and help out with any repairs or upgrades to the Julie. Cormac sold the catch, and Maggie sincerely thanked him before paying him well. Pleased, Cormac decided that regular business with her would probably be a good idea. As the sun rose, Cormac spotted another town across the water and decided to investigate. Most of it was destroyed, and only a single man was still living there. The hermit revealed himself to be Patrick, the whaler Boris's brother. He drew into their relationship by making off with the family crest, and he was now eager to rebuild the bridge with his brother by returning the crest. However, it had been lost in a boat to the south, dragged deep within the cliffs by the monster that destroyed the town. Cormac hoped that the monster was just a metaphor for an earthquake or something, and agreed to help find the family crest. Though excited to find treasure, something about this quest filled Cormac with a sense of trepidation. Something about the cliffs put him on edge. He knew going into them was a bad idea. A feeling told him though that the relic was most likely in the wrecked boat beyond the rocks blocking access to the ruined town. He'd need dynamite to clear it, and Boris was the only person likely to have that. Cormac figured resolving his family dispute was his best chance of getting it, and so he nervously headed deeper into the cliffs. Satisfied by his brief scouting foray, he decided to return the next day and head deeper in. Only... definitely not an earthquake. Returning to an alarmed Maggie for repairs, Cormac decided that as opposed to heading into the cliffs again, it might be a better idea to search around them first. Hopefully the crest had been washed out into the open sea at some point, and there wouldn't be any need to brave the monster at all. Dropping off a few crab pots, Cormac headed east, travelling all the way to the south side of Gale Cliffs. There he found a bunch of wrecks and a dock with a makeshift campsite, some symbols hastily drawn in the ashes of the fireplace. Cormac couldn't bear to leave all the salvage behind. After finding nothing of interest on the west side of the cliffs, he came right back and dredged up everything he could find. Rings, scrap, cloth, it was an amazing haul. Now laden with treasure, Cormac took the Julie back north. On the way, he got one more piece of treasure, another message in a bottle from the same woman as before. Her husband had become a salvager, who refused to let her on the boat after the incident of the renaming ceremony. Cormac's thoughts dwelled on the woman as he continued north, a strange feeling creeping into his chest. However, his thoughts soon returned to the present, as he realized any hopes of finding the family crest beyond the reach of a monster had been dashed. Now, only one option remained: head into the cliffs and hope for the best. The first expedition did not go well. Cormac found a wreck, but the monster managed to damage one of the Julie's engines. She was barely able to limp away. After an unsettled night on the southern dock, Cormac, desperate to get the crest, returned to the wreck. This time, the creature was ready for him. He quickly turned the boat around, but with a damaged engine, the Julie was barely moving. As if it could smell blood in the water, the monster continued to follow, far beyond where Cormac expected it to stop. It seemed inevitable that the beast would catch up, but finally, it turned away. Cormac slowly made his way back to Maggie. After making sure he was alright, she quickly assisted Cormac in repairing the Julie. At this point, he wasn't sure he'd make it out alive if he went back for the crest. Regardless, he wanted the relic, more than anything. And if he was gonna get it, he needed the crest. And so, Cormac steeled himself for another attempt. This time, however, the monster was nowhere in sight. Cormac dredged up the crest as quickly as he could and brought it back to Patrick. As grateful as he was, the man couldn't bear to deliver the crest to his brother in person. Cormac sympathized and offered to deliver it himself. Boris accepted his brother's apology, and whilst he cleaned the place up for Patrick's return, he asked Cormac to clear a channel in the cliffs using some dynamite. A beaming smile covered Cormac's face at the mere mention of the stuff. He set off immediately and blew the rocks to kingdom come. Not even the monster giving chase could lower his mood. That night, he picked up Patrick, dropped him off at Ingfell, and smiled all the while as the two brothers reunited. With all that settled, Cormac was offered full access to Boris's supply of dynamite. And so, the next day, Cormac blew up the rock standing between him and the relic. At last, he had his prize. His eyes sparkled as he brought aboard a rusted music box. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Before delivering it to the collector, Cormac did a little bit more fishing and finally managed to get a hull upgrade for the Julie. She instantly became the second most beautiful thing Cormac had ever seen. Eager to deliver the music box, he bid Maggie farewell and headed back to Greater Marrow. Once he arrived, the first stop was Roger the fishmonger. After Cormac delivered a crab for a contract, Roger said he had no more contracts to offer, but luckily, he had an order of his own. This one was for an aberrant. He'd heard rumours that they could drive someone insane, and was curious to see if there was any truth to that. Cormac had brought plenty of them onto his boat at this point. They were the closest fish got to feeling like treasure after all, so he was more than a little curious about the rumours too. Very soon after, he headed over to the trader, selling his treasures for an astounding £175. Riding off that high, he delivered the music box to the collector. Pleased, he gave Cormac a new power, Manifest, allowing him to teleport back to the collector's island at any time he chose. He then immediately urged Cormac to head for Stellar Basin, the likely location of the next relic. But first, Cormac still needed to deliver a tiger mackerel to the hooded man. It was an aberrant, but Cormac figured the man would be just fine with... He decided that Roger could have the fish instead. Upon his return to Greater Marrow, the lighthouse keeper warned Cormac that his treasure hunting would bring trouble for everyone. In response, he rolled his eyes, walked past her, and delivered the aberrant to Roger. He was curious how Roger was going to test whether the fish caused madness. The fishmonger then snapped at Cormac, kicked him out, and slammed the door. At this point, Cormac was beginning to get the niggling feeling that maybe the lighthouse keeper might not have been far off about him. On the walk back to the Julie, Cormac stumbled across the mayor and took the opportunity to ask about something that had been bothering him. The old mayor of a dock worker had mentioned. However, rather than offer any comfort, the mayor simply confirmed that the rumours were true. His predecessor had fled the town after throwing everything he could get his hands on into the ocean, screaming "throw it back" all the while. Once again, Cormac found himself unsettled. It hadn't been the best day, and he didn't end up sleeping very well that night. Keen to get some upgrades before his trip to Stellar Basin, Cormac spent the day fishing, and luckily, Roger was okay other than a minor headache. The two made a pledge to stay far away from aberrants from here on out. After a few more days of fishing, Cormac got his hands on a new trawl net and a fishing line for open water. With these, he decided he was all ready for his next voyage, and set off for Stellar Basin. On the way, he ran into another man in a hood, asking for food. Guilt took over Cormac and he immediately set about getting the man whatever he wanted. The only problem was that the man wanted a fangtooth. They lived too deep underwater for Cormac to catch with his current equipment. He decided to continue on to Stellar Basin, and hopefully find a fish or some equipment before the hooded man starved to death. After another day on the waves, Cormac stumbled on an abandoned town, built on platforms above the water, and, right behind it, was Stellar Basin. Cormac found himself immediately enchanted by the beauty all around him. The water itself seemed to glow. In his awe, he let the Julie drift over the center of the bay. Even as he backed away from it, he couldn't tear his eyes away. Something about that darkness lingered with him. Soon after, he found a long-abandoned research lab. There was plenty of terrific salvage inside, and a note saying that the lab had been attacked by something. Following this, the researchers had fled to a fort. Cormac figured that, seeing as how they were probably the only people around, the researchers would be his best lead for finding a relic. Sure enough, Cormac soon found the fort looming out of the fog. Upon approaching it, he was surprised to learn that only one researcher was working there, a woman who introduced herself as Kelsey. She explained that she hadn't seen another person in months, and, to make matters worse, her research had ground to a halt. To get it going again, she needed fish samples, and kindly asked if it would be possible for Cormac to deliver them. He wasn't overly keen on the idea of taking time away from treasure hunting to fish, but he felt for Kelsey, and agreed to help. And anyway, he figured the giant monster probably had something to do with the relic, and if anyone could figure out a way to get past it, It would probably be a scientist. So Cormac set off to find the fish. On the way, he found a message in a bottle. A woman, presumably the same one who had written all the other messages, described being proposed to in the middle of the basin at night. The idea of it alone warmed Cormac's heart. Further to the south, he also stumbled across Maggie on her pontoon and, soon after, began reeling in the requested fish. He managed to catch a glowing octopus, but it was taken over by a strange infection. Next, he caught a glowing squid, which just meant he needed to catch a jellyfish. Figuring one probably wouldn't bite his line, Cormac decided to use the trawl net, and sure enough, a jellyfish drifted right into it. With the fish all delivered, Kelsey then asked Cormac to recover some parts from her lab. After scouring through it for an hour, he recovered everything Kelsey asked for and delivered it to her. She used the parts to make a deep-sea fishing line, which would allow Cormac to get the next batch of fish Kelsey needed. However, that would have to wait. Now, with the right equipment, Cormac could finally deliver a fangtooth to the hooded man. The last thing the man asked for was a blue crab. Cormac had placed plenty of crab pots already, so he hurried back to check them. Sure enough, there was a crab. After receiving it, the man awarded a very relieved Cormac with a nice book for his trouble. With that settled, he quickly got back to work and managed to catch all the fish Kelsey needed. By now, she developed a way to deter the creature at the bottom of the abyss. All Cormac had to do was activate the generator on the old pontoon, and the creature would stay away for a few minutes. He would then have a chance to head into the center of the basin and catch the last few specimens Kelsey needed to finish her research. Nervous but curious, Cormac headed over and activated the generator. A beacon began to emanate from the pontoon, and the creature's red glow disappeared. Cormac nervously made his way out to the center of the basin. He managed to catch a few fish, and the creature didn't bother him at all. And so, he eagerly reactivated the beacon, then caught as many fish and dredged up as much treasure as he possibly could. The more he did it, the more his sense of confidence and safety grew. It didn't take long for him to pull up the relic, a massive golden ring. Overjoyed, he left the abyss behind, hopefully for good. As Cormac returned from catching the last of Kelsey's requested fish out in the open sea, he spotted something moving on a beach next to the abandoned town. Upon closer inspection, it revealed itself to be a dog, all alone on the island. Cormac immediately set about trying to get it aboard the Julie. Eventually, he managed to coerce it onto the boat, at which point it curled up on the deck and fell asleep. Of course, as happy as he was to have rescued the dog, there remained the question of what to do with it. Cormac figured maybe he could adopt it himself, but decided against it given how dangerous his voyages had proven to be so far. The dog deserved a more stable home, and he realized there was someone who could provide that just perfectly. He returned to Kelsey with the final samples, so she was at last able to finish her research. She concluded that the monster in the middle of Stellar Basin was likely responsible for the aberrants. The area was contaminated, and that staying far away would be a good idea. Cormac agreed. Before he left, he gave Kelsey one last thing. The dog. Surprised and delighted, she accepted the new companion wholeheartedly. The dog took to her almost immediately, and, as if in thanks, vomited up a ring. In hindsight, Cormac wasn't sure what made Kelsey look more off-put, the vomit or his delight over the puke-covered ring. As Kelsey happily petted her new friend, Cormac was left with a quiet sense of satisfaction. Despite how boring it was, his fishing had done some good for someone. He fished in the seas around Stellar Basin for a while yet, selling his catches to Maggie and chewing on the feeling that he'd strangely forgotten something. Over the course of doing business with her, he learned that Maggie shared his enjoyment of reading. The pair exchanged some books, and Cormac was pleased to discover his friend had excellent taste. Soon after, he made his way back to Greater Marrow and delivered the relic. As thanks, the collector gifted him the power of banishment, which would drive away anything trying to devour him and the Julie. He informed Cormac that the next relic was most likely in Twisted Strand, and advised him to head over there and get it. Eager to get going, Cormac quickly got to work on his preparations. As he took stock of his treasure, the lighthouse keeper asked if he had found what he was looking for. For some reason, a weird feeling came over him and he opted to tell her he'd been out fishing. The response annoyed her no end, but he figured she shouldn't have been poking around in his business anyway. The next morning, he sold his treasure to the trader for a whopping £882. Cormac practically skipped across the dock on the way back to the Julie. Eager to get to Twisted Strand as fast as possible, he installed the peculiar engine from the collector's shed. It would allow the Julie to move faster the quicker his heartbeat was, which would be perfect given how excited he was With preparations complete, Cormac set off with all haste for Twisted Strand, his mind buzzing. He was so excited that he hit a rock and accidentally headed for Stellar Basin instead. After he got back on course, Cormac ran into another hooded man and immediately dropped everything to get him whatever he wanted. He was beginning to wonder if that first man had been a sacrifice just to motivate him. After getting the man the tarpon he requested, the next item was a horseshoe crab. Figuring he'd need to dump a crab pot near or in Twisted Strand to get that, Cormac decided just to set off for the foreboding-looking swamp rising out of the fog. As it turned out, Maggie happened to have another pontoon near Twisted Strand. Apparently the place brought in surprisingly good business. Cormac slept on the pontoon that night, dumped a few crab pots, and decided to head into the swamp come morning. Maggie advised against it, but Cormac was already gone by the time he began to consider her words. Upon entering the swamp, Cormac found a weird wooden structure in the middle of the lagoon. Not to mention, honestly, he wasn't sure what else to expect at this point. Heading deeper in, Cormac spotted a red arrow on a tree, pointing deeper into the swamp. Following the directions, he found himself at the camp of an old airman named Tom. His entire squad had been brought down in a storm some time ago. He asked Cormac to help him kill the monsters that dwelt in the swamp, creatures he called the Mind Suckers. Whilst initially hesitant, Cormac realized that, based on how things had gone so far, this was probably his best lead to get the relic, so he agreed to help. In order to bring down the Mindsuckers, Cormac would need to retrieve the 3 parts of Tom's mortar, so he got to searching. His trepidation slowly vanished as he began to realize that every part of this was like a giant treasure hunt, and excitement took over him. While on the hunt, he managed to get the hooded man a horseshoe crab. All the man needed now was a barrel eye, something Cormac caught in a begrudging trip to the south. With the hooded man satisfied, Cormac got back to work. It didn't take long before he found a wreck which might have had some treasure. He was about to explore it when... Cormac decided there was definitely better treasure elsewhere. At this point, he was well into the habit of getting up at 4 in the morning and getting to bed very late at night. Maggie expressed her concern, only for Cormac to dismiss her. Not long after, the Mindsuckers began to follow him. Without much space, Cormac didn't want to risk using haste and crashing into something, so he opted for Banish instead, but it never kept them away for long. No matter how often they came after him, it wasn't enough to deter Cormac. He raced through Twisted Strand day in and day out, his heart racing the entire time. Before he knew it, all of the mortar parts had been collected. Next, Tom asked Cormac to get some fish for bait that could lure the Mindsuckers into a trap. Cormac rolled his eyes and listened to what Tom needed. Most of the fish wouldn't be an issue, but one was a catfish. Cormac had no idea how to find one, and he couldn't be asked looking for it when there was still a relic to find. He knew though, he knew somehow Tom had it. He had it on him. He was sure of it. If he just did what the man wanted, the relic would be all his. He soon caught all of the other required fish, then set about trying to find a catfish. Hours passed. Still nothing. Cormac was getting frantic. He needed to get the relic. He had to. It was all he could think about. The sun slipped away, darkness fell, the waterways all began to look the same. The Mindsuckers felt closer than ever. The roots themselves came alive to trap him. Movement in the water. Cormac stopped. A line over the side and a catfish was dragged aboard. He quickly took off into the channels, speeding down them. He couldn't damage the Julie, couldn't open sea. His thoughts were still lost in a haze of static, but finally, the first one began to emerge. He needed to find the relic. Maggie could tell how frazzled he was, but her concerns were met with nothing but silence. Cormac made it back to Tom. With the bait prepared, he directed Cormac over to the large wooden platforms. They were traps. With a little bait, they'd ensnare the Mindsuckers. Cormac set about the work as quickly as he could. In short order, each one of the Mindsuckers was lowered into the traps and blown to pieces. Once the deed was done, Cormac gathered what little of their heads remained and dumped them at Tom's feet. Finally satisfied, he gave Cormac the relic, a necklace. This time, he didn't cheer or celebrate. All he could manage was a smile and a sigh of relief. He headed straight for the collector, who once again rewarded him with a new power, atrophy. It granted the ability to harvest an entire fishing spot all at once, freeing up more time for treasure hunting. Now, only one relic remained, a devil's spine. Cormac immediately swelled with renewed excitement at the prospect of heading there. Before that though, he wanted some upgrades, and, to make a start on the money, he headed back to Twisted Strand to dredge up any treasure he had missed during his time there. However, as he searched for treasure, something else entirely caught his eye. A campsite, strange symbols drawn into the sand around it, and somebody was there. A man shouting at him. Curious, Cormac spoke to him. The man began rambling about throwing it back, saying that Cormac was somebody's husband. The man seemed familiar, but Cormac couldn't quite. Then it hit him. Throw it back. Lost his mind. The old mayor. He raved and hollered about an evil red book and so many other incomprehensible things. Cormac was disturbed. A wife? He couldn't remember having one, but there was a feeling in his chest. It was like... The red book, though. That sounded interesting. Quite a treasure to find, no doubt. Cormac's mind raced at the thought of searching for it. The old mayor mentioned the lighthouse keeper, so Cormac set off to ask her about the book, leaving the mad, old man alone on the island. The lighthouse keeper gave no useful answers. Cormac talked to the mayor to get some clues, but got nothing. With no leads, he set about upgrading the Julie as quickly as possible, so he could at least head for Devil's Spine. After a sprint of fishing, the Julie was, at last, practically fully realized. Cormac was bringing in the biggest hauls of his career. With these, he could afford to hunt treasure much more, and bring in the minimum number of catches necessary until he could finally hunt treasure full time, hopefully someday soon. But as he brought in a catch, a profound quiet fell over his usually racing mind. His chest tightened, something pressing down on him. The book. The red book. He'd been turning it over and over again in his mind, trying to figure out how to find it, but some part of him already knew how to do that. He couldn't explain it. A thought appeared, as if it broke through a barrier in the back of his mind. He'd seen the book before, but where? Red book. Red book. Red book. Red book! Cormac raced to the collector's island. Bursting through the front door, he asked about the red book, the one in the collector's hands. The man gave no answer. He only said that he had to save her, that Cormac had begged him to forget, so he could move on, but he never could, no matter how hard he tried. But now he didn't have to. Julie was taken by the depths in exchange for something, but she could be okay. There wasn't any need for the weight anymore. The relics were all that was needed. Cormac asked for the book. No response. He felt something he'd never experienced before. A sudden rush of anger. His fist shot out, and the only thing it hit was a mirror. Cormac pulled his hand away, staring into the broken glass, blood oozing from between his knuckles, and the red book was in his shaking hands. He was completely alone. He always had been. The messages in the bottles, the handwriting, it... Julie. His heart beat faster and faster. A haze fell over his mind as thick as the nighttime fog. Only one thought managed to pierce through, clear as day. He needed the last relic, and he needed it now. Only then would Julie be okay. Only then would the weight always holding him back would be gone. He could finally hunt treasure in peace, forever, with her. He immediately departed for Devil's Spine. On the way, he stumbled upon another hooded man. Cormac let out a loud groan, got all the fish the man wanted, then left him alone. He explored the ruins of an ancient civilization, protruding from the blackened rocks of the volcanic islands. He found little else but a giant, monstrous fish lurking in the sunken walls. Maggie had set up a pontoon, selling some of the more exotic fish in the volcanic waters. She said something to him, but Cormac didn't listen to a word of it. After only an hour's sleep, he got back out on the water. He stumbled on a dock. From a temple above it emerged a fanatical man who wouldn't say his name. He quizzed Cormac on becoming an initiate, something there was no time for. Cormac was about to leave, but was asked to recover the 3 fathomless flames, essential parts of a ceremony. This made Cormac stop. He was hesitant to waste time, but he'd gotten every other relic for roundabout means. Why would this one be any different? He set off to find the flames. The smaller fish in these waters would apparently lead the giant monster to the Julie. He couldn't let that thing take them. Not now. The first flame required just a couple of crabs. They were easily collected. The flame and the treasure alongside it. Cormac chuckled as he put away his haul and returned the flame to the fanatic's temple. Upon trying to leave, Cormac went forward instead of reversing, breaking his headlight. He had to head over to Maggie's for repairs. Her expression wasn't something he could read. The second flame required 2 fish from the ruins. The first was easy to get, the other was barely caught without the Julie being devoured. Only 1 flame remained, and it required 2 aberrants. After hours, days of searching, Cormac tried something new. The Sign of Ruin, taken from the old shed. He figured it might draw the aberrants he needed. Both of them were caught not long after. With all 3 flames gathered, the fanatic began his ritual. He pulled out a pocket watch. Cormac's eyes fixated on it. He knew it was a relic, but something dragged his gaze away. The fanatic had built a pyre at the top of the temple. He stood over it. Cormac asked him what he was doing. A blue flame ignited, the fire rising up the fanatic's body as he chanted. Cormac was frozen in place. The fire engulfed the man completely, and then he was gone. Cormac gazed at the pyre, eyes wide. All that remained, amidst the ash and burned wood, was the pocket watch. Cormac slowly picked it up, and he remained completely frozen in place. He found himself on the Julie. His gaze turned southwards. He'd never even learned the fanatic's name. Had he really just let a man die over a pocket watch? Of course, it wouldn't be the first time. Hunting treasure was Cormac's world. It left room for nothing else, crushing everything that tried to take up its space. Maybe even him too. Was it worth it in the end? Of course it was. That's what Cormac tried to tell himself. It made him happy, it did, really, but all those other people, surely. Maggie was on the pontoon, asking if he was alright, where he was going next. Cormac wasn't sure. He turned his gaze south again. He knew that he could bring Julie back now. His conscience would be cleared, and endless, glittering horizons of treasure would be all that remained. But he knew, deep down, that Julie had to come from somewhere, probably the same place as the book. If he brought her back, it would open the door to that place again. He'd only opened it a crack once before, to bring up this book, and it had killed Julie. The fog, the old mare, these monsters, it had done so much harm to so many people. Was his own happiness worth it? If it came at the expense of everyone else's? He deserved to be happy too, he knew that, he wanted to be. But the lighthouse keeper, Samantha, Roger, Boris, Patrick, Kelsey, the dog, Tom, Maggie, even those hooded men, they all deserved to be happy too. And Cormac could ensure that they would be. He knew how. He thought about what he'd have to do for a long time. Eventually, he turned back to Maggie and managed a small smile. He told her he'd remembered something she asked earlier, and yeah, it was time for a break. A nice, long, relaxing break away from it all. Maggie seemed reassured, asked him to take it easy and have fun. Cormac assured her he would, and left the pontoon for the very last time. He crossed the sea to Greater Marrow. The lighthouse keeper knew. More than anyone she knew. She tried to warn him. She could help him with what he had to do. Sure enough, she advised him to head out to the ocean, back to the place the book was found. She would light the way. All he had to do was throw it back into the sea. As the fog rolled in, Cormac headed for where it all began. There, he stopped the Julie and raised the book above his head. His arms stopped for a moment, as if a voice deep inside was urging him to reconsider. He continued to stare into the deep, and threw the book into it. Cormac let out a breath and smiled. He lay down on the deck, staring at the sky. With the book gone, the door was closed, and everyone was going to be okay. He gave Julie a little pat and thanked her for putting up with him all that time, no matter how selfish he'd been. He wasn't going to drag her around on his treasure hunts anymore, and he'd never leave her behind again. There was only one thing he wanted now: to stay with her forever.